I know you've come as been introduced to you to find out more about agricultural policy under my stewardship, which is still bringing a lot of benefits to the people of Ghana. First of all, you all know that the flagship program, Planting for Food and Jobs, was a major intervention by the Akufo-Addo government in transforming the economy of Ghana by promoting productivity in agriculture and specifically targeting farmers. Farmers who are mainly smallholders operating 3, 4 acres, 5 acres of land at any one moment, haven't been given the opportunity to prove themselves until this government came with the Planting for Food and Jobs. Unfortunately, Planting for Food and Jobs has 5 components, what we call modules, but it's only one module which is taking center stage. Of course, I can understand because it's to do with our stomachs. There's a food crop component of Planting for Food and Jobs. There are other components which are equally important to transform agriculture in Ghana. And these include the tree, what we used to call the Planting for Export and Rural Development, which targeted 6 crops for development, the 3 crops to the level of cocoa. Cocoa has been the mainstay of this economy for over 130 years now. And in spite of the fact that in 1922, the governor of the Gold Coast, Gordon Gagisberg, made the observation that the Gold Coast was producing 60% of global output of cocoa, that it was time we turn our attention to other tree crops like rubber and others. Since then, every government which comes to govern has had this lip service of diversification, but it's never happened until the arrival of the Akufo-Addo government. And under this government, we launched the Planting for Food and Jobs, the 5 modules by the President of the Republic, Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo, in various parts of this country. The component which I am talking about today is what the Planting for Export and Rural Development, which I piloted through the ministry's own personnel to come up with a document for submission to the Cabinet of the Republic, which was eventually approved and sent on to the Parliament of Ghana, and in September 2019 was approved as an act. The Parliament passed an Act 1010 in 2019 for the the creation of this authority. I want to remind you that since 1947, with the creation of Ghana Cocoa Board, there has not been one single commodity institution created since then. And one would be wondering why, because you have crops which today the values are much higher than cocoa, and yet we are stuck with cocoa with the potential of other tree crops. So the idea about the Tree Crop Development Authority is to shepherd these 6 potential crops: cashew, shea, mango, coconut, oil palm, and rubber, to be able, each of them, to develop and earn Ghana as much as cocoa is earning Ghana today. At the moment, Ghana is earning about $1.5 billion from cocoa. These other crops have the potential to earn Ghana even more, $2-3 billion. And we have to go to Cote d'Ivoire to see exactly what I mean by that. So, having created the authority in Parliament, the President of the Republic in August 2020 inaugurated the board and the management of this Tree Crop Development Authority in Kumasi, where it's headquartered. And the feasibility study, which was submitted through Parliament, was that it needed a seed fund of only $15 million for the first 3 years. Just $5 million each year for the first 3 years, and that was it. It will be able to borrow on its own profitability and so on, and would not be part of the budget of the Republic of Ghana. Just like Cocoa Board operations do not come into the budget. They will be able to go to the bank to raise their monies, whether locally or overseas, or a combination of the two. So this authority was created. Now, to get it off the ground for this is the 3rd year of the operation. You ask me how much money has been disbursed to the authority. By now, we should have the government should have disbursed $15 million, but as we speak, it's only $3 million, and means that the vision of contributing to the future of the economy of this country was being held back. So I entered into discussions with Mr. Afriyie Akoto, who is the country representative of the World Bank, and submitted the project and all its aspects to that organization. And they saw that there's something to be said, in fact, for supporting the Tree Crop Development Authority. So they took it up and have gone through the system. Of course, by the time the approval came this month, I had left the organization. But I'm so pleased to see that vision is now very, very feasible, because it has the potential of earning this country anything up to $12 billion after 6-7 years of implementation. And you only have to go across the border to Cote d'Ivoire to see what is happening. The same 5 crops are giving Cote d'Ivoire $7-8 billion every year, while the 5 crops, including cocoa in Ghana, is earning less than $2 billion. So the potential is huge for this organization to contribute to financing our development. For the last, since independence, we've been to the IMF 17 times. This is the 17th time that we are just coming out of the negotiations and approval systems. And it's very simple. We've been financing our development through debt, borrowing locally and externally to support our development. And in spite of the fact that we are paying interest and the capital that we borrow, we are not generating enough revenue from these borrowings to be able to service the debt and also pay back the principals. And hence, every 3-4 years, we fall down. We fall down because we go back to the borrowing market, to the debt markets, borrow Eurobond, bilateral, local, treasury bills, and so on to develop. And no country can develop with that kind of strategy. So if it hasn't been working, financing our development with debt, then we have to look inside to see what resources we can generate. And of course, those resources are just below the soil. That is all we have. We've been mining gold for over 100 years in Obuasi. Ghana is now the biggest, for some years now, the biggest producer of gold in Africa. And yet we are in the clutches of the IMF. President Kufuor's time, we discovered oil, and we thought all our problems would be solved and our financing will come from oil. What do we see? Oil production has actually been dropping in the last few years. So we are not getting much. But then my experience in the 6 years at the ministry shows me that working with Ghanaian farmers, and don't forget, I have been in the international system for 18 years before I came back to Ghana, working with all kinds of government in Asia, South America, in Europe, and so on. I realized that the Ghanaian farmer, with a little push, with little persuasion, can really perform. So we believe that if Ghanaian farmer is given the full support, they can help generate the foreign exchange that we need through this Tree Crop Development Authority, and also through our traditional food crops like maize, rice, and the others. People those who are criticizing planting for food and just, oh, we are importing. There's no country in the world who doesn't import. America imports, Russia imports, China imports. But it's the quantities the proportions that they import, that makes a difference. So in actual fact, we've been exporting maize and others and the planting for food and jobs, the food crop component of it. Informally, the informal trade between us and our neighbors, when we did a calculation at the ministry, at the time I was there, amounted to something like $100 million of in 2021, to be specific, of informal trade, amount of grains that we take across our borders to our neighbors, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, Nigeria, Togo, Benin, and others. So there is a huge potential there for us to earn foreign exchange if we are able to increase our productivity of these smallholders and so on. There's this fanciful idea that smallholders cannot deliver. They've delivered a global industry like cocoa for Ghana for 100 years. So why do you think they cannot do the same for the others if we support them? And planting for food and jobs, my lesson from it is that in addition to the tree crop of cocoa, which we are now, hopefully with this new financing, will diversify into other crops so we can earn more foreign exchange. In order that we can use the additional foreign exchange to finance our industrialization, our education, our health, our infrastructure, roads, motorways, farm roads, and all of those things. That we have that potential to be able to do that if we support farmers. So I'm glad to see that even having left office for about 6 months, a lot of these initiatives that I took are coming into fruition. Apart from the Tree Crop Development Authority, there are others. For instance, we have the Grain Development Authority lying in Parliament for the last 6 months. I appeal to the Speaker of Parliament through this medium to ensure that that legislation comes through so that we can establish the Grain Development Authority along the same lines as the Tree Crop and the Cocoa Board authorities, and to promote the development and the volume of exports of grains and to reduce our food security to the minimum. In addition to that, there's a very clear case of shortage of agricultural credit. The banks are not lending. At the last count, only 3.1% of total agricultural credit, total credit in lending by the banks went to agriculture. And even then, most of that is for cocoa purchases, not real production or marketing or processing. So we have, when I left, we had this discussion that I brought to cabinet so that legislation can be put in place. We're discussing with the bankers and so on how to factor that legislation to ensure that the banks actually lend to support farmers in the work that they do. In addition to that, there's I left in my office the Horticultural Development Authority and then the Poultry Development Authority. These two were in the pipeline, and I'm hoping that they will come into eventually travel through the system to go to Parliament for the creation of these institutions, which will then drive the development of the various subsectors of agriculture to transform this country into a country, first world country, by generating more than enough foreign exchange and local revenue to fund our development for the future. So that's the vision I have for the nation Ghana, that through this path, through the agricultural path, through the path of farmers of Ghana, this country can be transformed into a land of prosperity for all of us.